Good afternoon. Let me start off again where we started jury selection, or at least the judge did, that I don't have to prove or disprove anything in this case. I'm going to go through with you what we believe the evidence will show in a moment. But as I said in my voir dire with the jury, this case involves self-defense. That's why we're in trial. The state calls this murder. We have pled not guilty. This is not a murder. And again, with all due respect to the state, this is the defense speaking here. Unfortunately, in defending himself, Mr. Dumercy killed Mr. Peoples. Okay, that's what this is. I want to give you brief background on why he ended up having to use deadly force in this case. And then, we'll leave the rest of the testimony and evidence, including video of the shooting in this case. So I want to start with the video first, because one of the most important pieces of evidence in this case is the flight of Mr. Dumercy into the gas station. Now, the state's saying this was a safe place. We completely disagree with that. But Mr. Dumercy, you'll hear in evidence, I believe, that he came upon, just literally accidentally, the vehicle that turned out to be his ex-girlfriend, Mr. Peoples, and her brother in the car. And he came next to the vehicle. He saw Peoples in the vehicle, or people saw him. Not Mr. Dumercy, because he left the area. He took his bike and left. They turned their car around. They followed Mr. Peoples to first a section across the street. Mr. Peoples got out of the vehicle, got back in, and he was driven to the gas station in pursuit of Mr. Dumercy. He definitely wanted to exit that vehicle. I believe the evidence will show this, to confront Mr. Dumercy at that time. Exited the vehicle. Walked towards the gas station. And I'm going to just briefly touch on what was occurring in the background with Mr. Dumercy and Peoples. But at that point, Mr. Dumercy feared for his life. He literally went into the gas station to flee. Now, this is what happened, unfortunately, for Mr. Dumercy and unfortunately for Mr. Peoples, because the back door, which, if you would just pretend for a moment that door by the jury room is the exit from the gas station, and then there's a front door. Those are the only two doors in the gas station. He literally goes to that door, you'll see in video, and attempts to get out, and unfortunately it was locked. And he saw Mr. Peoples walking towards the gas station, and at that point, yes, he did walk out fearing that Peoples was there to do him harm or kill him, and he shot Mr. Peoples. So just hold that thought for a moment. Again, you will see on video that Dumercy actually attempted to get out that back door and take flight from Mr. Peoples, but unfortunately that back door was locked. Now, in the background, in the text messages and what you've heard about the end of the relationship, or I don't know if you want to call it ongoing relationship with the girlfriend, is like a back drama to the story, but it has very little to do with why the shooting took place. You'll hear that Mr. Peoples shot at Mr. Dumercy. You'll hear he threatened him. You'll hear he went to his mother's house looking for him. You'll hear from Mr. Dumercy is going to testify in this case. So you'll hear about what Mr. Dumercy believed and knew about Mr. Peoples and went into his thought process on why he literally for a while became homeless, because he was afraid to stay at the home because Peoples knew where he lived, through Miss McRae. He lived with a pastor for a while. He lived with a manager he was working 2 jobs at the time. He literally quit his jobs because he believed that Peoples would eventually come to work and do him harm. He never called the police. And you'll hear he didn't call because, and again, this is no disrespect, but this is what I believe he will testify to, is that, the neighborhood where he is from, This isn't, it would literally have made it worse had he gone to law enforcement in this case, because of who he believed Peoples hung out with and the implications of doing that. So obviously you're going to hear, you're going to hear more detail on this, but this, again, opening statement is just an outline. We're confident, though, that you will find Mr. Dumercy not guilty. Had that back door been unlocked, we would not be here today. He never meant to kill Mr. Peoples when he entered as he approached that gas station. But Peoples approached him. The back door was locked. You'll hear again, Mr. Dumercy will testify, you'll hear about everything that went into the thought process about fearing and having fear that Mr. Peoples was going to harm him. And he felt that Mr. Peoples was armed at the time and fired. And now Mr. Peoples is, dead. So your decision here, whether it's 2 or 3 days, is going to be to decide if the state proves you beyond a reasonable doubt murder, or, again, and I don't have to prove or disprove anything, but whether or not my client, Mr. Dumercy, acted in self-defense. You will hear about Florida Stand Your Ground law. You'll be instructed on that. We believe strongly that the evidence is such that he acted in conformity with Florida law when he, unfortunately, felt it necessary to shoot Mr. Peoples. So, with that said, I'm asking everyone to keep an open mind, which all of you said you would at the start of this, that you'll presume Mr. Dumercy not guilty, and that you'll hold the state to their burden of proof. And we're asking at the conclusion of this case that you find Delinord Dumercy not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you.